Warning: the following video contains personal opinions and may contain potential bias. Anyone sensitive to someone else's opinion may want to turn away now. But thanks for watching anyways. Hosted live on an affordable island located somewhere roughly around the Alola region, it's the first and only Silver League's Top 10 Winners of Gen 7 Award Show! And here's your host, Silver August! Thank you. Now in our last award show... Hold on a moment. I'm in the wrong outfit again! Oh well, I suppose it's no big deal. Suit me up! That was different. Thanks? But anyways, in our last award show, we put a spotlight on some of the lesser aspects of Generation 7. But that's not to say that this generation was absent of positives as well, because there was a lot of good that came out of it, at least in my opinion. That warning at the beginning of these videos, that is definitely in full effect here, because I just know that some of the awards being given out today are going to be quite controversial, so you've been warned. But just like with the Top 10 Loser Awards, things won't be limited to just the core games, but all aspects of Pokemon in Generation 7. The games, the anime, the movies, anything you can think of, except the manga because I haven't read it, has a chance to walk away with some honorary gold tonight. So with all that said, let's not waste any more time and start handing out some awards to those who have made a positive impact in Generation 7. Number 10. Pokepelago and Hyper Training. It's been said before in my pros and cons videos of Pokemon Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon, but for someone like myself who's incredibly busy, the Pokepelago was a welcome addition. Yes, a part of me will always prefer Super Training, simply because Super Training was instant. Well, technically, you still had to earn the end results, but you didn't have to wait overnight basically, or exploit a glitch in the base version of Pokemon Sun and Moon. Which, by the way, was another feature that made the Pelago very noteworthy, as thanks to the very handy timing glitch, you were able to basically get the full effects of the Pelago immediately when it came to the section of the Pelago that basically did EV training for your Pokemon. But there were other neat features too. You could get all sorts of cool items, evolution items, berries, you can hatch eggs quicker, you could get beans that can make your Pokemon like you more, which in turn would help them level up quicker, get more critical hits, dodge moves, and basically make the game even easier. There was a lot going on in the Pokepelago that I really enjoyed, and by the looks of Pokemon Camp and Sword and Shield, it seems like this idea is going to evolve yet again into a concept that hopefully I'm going to enjoy very much. As for Hyper Training on the other hand, well, it's not the easiest thing to make use out of. However, the best part about this feature isn't the fact that it can make any Pokemon have perfect IVs. That's all well and good because breeding is easy enough as it is. No, what makes it really special is the fact that it makes all those old legendaries, and in particular maybe some of those shinies you caught way back when, actually viable, assuming they have good natures. Just aim for the nature and the hidden power, and then do the oh so simple task of grinding them to level 100, fish out some bottle caps, and there you go. Perfect IVs while retaining their hidden power. It's great. It was a simple solution that wasn't just spoon-fed to the fans. You weren't just given perfect IVs for nothing, you still have to work for it, and in that regard, it strikes a good balance between being fair to the fans who want special IVs for certain Pokemon to get hidden powers, or just got really lucky with a shiny but unfortunately can't use it because its stats suck, and rectifying all of that and making more Pokemon you've obtained useful while discouraging the temptation to cheat. And for someone like myself, I really like that. So Pokepelago and Hyper Training, good job. You're a pair of star-highlighted new features that were introduced in Pokemon Sun and Moon and are proven to be features that weren't limited to just these games, as we saw features like this in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and for those reasons, you two are a pair of features that are certainly winners. And now, accepting the award for outstanding new features introduced into a Pokemon game that would become standard for the foreseeable future, we have Mon! Number 9. Pokemon Everyone's Story / The Power of Us. You did it! You finally did it! You made a good Pokemon movie after like 10 years! See this Mewtwo Strikes Back evolution? This is how you do a good Pokemon movie! Pokemon Everyone's Story, otherwise known as The Power of Us if you're watching it dubbed, was a movie that in early advertising and promotion seemed like it was kind of homaging Pokemon 2000, but it turned out not really. And honestly, the biggest flaw of this movie is the fact that Lugia is incredibly shoehorned in, like literally shoehorned in at the last minute, because otherwise it's a really darn good movie. As both of the titles imply, it is a movie that is telling multiple stories at once, and they're all nice stories. about self-confidence, about learning not to lie anymore, about dealing with the consequences of your own actions, overcoming your own limits, and even overcoming personal traumas. The crazy thing about this movie is it's effectively Pokemon Go the movie. Because think about it, pretty much every main character in this movie, including even Ash, is only ever shown with one partner Pokemon that's always outside of the Pokeball. Similar to how in Pokemon Go, you can have a buddy Pokemon who's always traveling alongside you. And then a whole bunch of people enter a competition where there's a whole bunch of Pokemon to catch, similar to a Community Day event. And it's a story about everyone's personal journey in this Pokemon world. This is effectively the philosophy of Pokemon Go. This is Pokemon Go the movie, people! This is it right here, and I love it! Just look at how cool this Japanese poster in particular is. Just, oh my god, it's gorgeous! And it further cements my initial love-hate and turned into just straight-up fanboyish love for Wit Studio, because they had a hand in producing this movie. And it shows. Is it my favorite Pokemon movie ever? No. Spell of the Unknown is still my favorite Pokemon movie ever, hands down. But I would say that Power of Us is pretty up there. Easily in the top 5, maybe second place. I'd really have to think about that and rewatch all the movies to see for sure. But otherwise, yeah, this is a fantastic movie. I highly recommend it. And once again, Pokemon I Choose You and Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, this is how you do it right. This is how you tell a genuine good story with Pokemon. You don't hammer in blatant nostalgia, you just use the elements of the franchise to tell a good story. And man, I cannot say enough good things about this movie. I love it, and I encourage all of you guys to check it out if you haven't already. And now, accepting the Not Oscar Award for an excellent collaborative effort in animation, we have The Ghost of Snubbull. Oh. Ugh. Number 8. Pokemon Go. Alright, so before I even say anything, I already know that some of you in the audience are just seething with anger at the very notion of acknowledging Pokemon Go in the first place. And don't worry, I was there at one point too, so I know how you feel. And I'm also aware that some of you might be quick to point out that Pokemon Go technically came out before Pokemon Sun and Moon, and is this true if we're going strictly off of release dates? But an overwhelming majority of the biggest features and updates that went into Pokemon Go that made it basically the game it is today came out during Gen 7. So while it arguably peaked in popularity during the tail end of Gen 6, its proven longevity surfaced throughout Gen 7. So that's why I'm counting it as a winner on this list. Because technicalities aside, I was there. I understand why it's so easy to hate on Pokemon Go, because it challenges the notion of what is an acceptable and enjoyable Pokemon game. For many people, it's just the core games and that's it. But Pokemon has always been a brand that has had so many ways for people to enjoy it. And Pokemon Go is simply just another way to enjoy Pokemon. It proved to be an extremely successful one, massively successful in fact, and it was one so successful that it actually revitalized the brand in many ways. People who had long forgotten about Pokemon got back into it. Sure, their interest didn't go beyond the mobile games, which there were already a few out at the time and more came out since Pokemon Go's release, but Pokemon was making headlines on actual news outlets. Sure, some of it was because people were being idiots when they were playing Pokemon Go and not watching where they were going, which resulted in advisory warnings when you boot up Pokemon Go in the first place. And for a long time, I largely ignored Pokemon Go. But then I gave it a chance, and I saw the appeal. The gameplay of Pokemon Go is not a simplification of the core Pokemon games. It's its own thing. The goal initially is to just catch Pokemon. Tons and tons of Pokemon. But the game goes off of a catch and release system, where you're encouraged to catch multiple Pokemon of the same family line over and over again, because catching and releasing a Pokemon rewards you with candy that you can use to power up a Pokemon of the same species. So assuming you want the best Pokemon possible, once you have a 3-star Pokemon, you can just focus on giving that Pokemon all the candy to power them up and enable them to evolve but also get stronger. And take them into gyms for battles, or against other players, or now, as of some of the latest updates, for battling Team Rocket. And there is the fair criticism that your ability to enjoy Pokemon Go is entirely dependent on your own personal location. Live in a major city and you pretty much have a Pokestop literally around every single corner. Live in the middle of nowhere? Well, you'll be lucky if you have one Pokestop. It is entirely dependent on location, and the fact that some Pokemon are literally exclusive to entire continents is a bit of BS. But the idea of tying together the real world and the world of Pokemon worked out pretty impressively with this game. It brings out that experience of being an actual real-life Pokemon trainer. And that's pretty neat. Their intention making people feel like trainers more or less worked. It's a mobile game that successfully gets people to interact in public with community days. There's events going on all the time in this game. There's new quests to fulfill, new Pokemon are being added all the time, albeit by slowly trickling out new Pokemon as they go into a new generation. And while they're certainly eventually going to catch up to the current generation of Pokemon, I'm sure they have it planned out where that's not going to happen for quite a while. Either way, it means that something new is always happening within Pokemon Go, and it's a fairly accessible mobile game at that, unlike say Pokemon Masters. But regardless of that, Pokemon Go has had a huge impact on the franchise. Heck, we're only on Award 8 of this list, and yet there's already been something that's been directly influenced by the existence of Pokemon Go. And spoiler alert, it's not the only thing on this list that was directly affected by the existence of this mobile game. So to deny that Pokemon Go hasn't had a major impact on the franchise is just straight up denial. Now whether or not it's been a positive impact is up to one's personal opinion, but strictly speaking, nothing is truly good or bad. There's pros and cons to everything, as many of you are no doubt aware based on the videos I put out on the channel. So while Pokemon Go has had a few negative side effects on the franchise, in my personal opinion, it doesn't outweigh the positives. And if I'm to be completely honest, Pokemon Go did help keep my interest in the brand when I found myself kind of burnt out on the core Pokemon games for various personal reasons. So on top of having an overwhelming positive impact on the brand, it had an overall positive impact on myself. And this is coming from someone who initially despised the idea of Pokemon Go. So if only for that reason, Pokemon Go, you are definitely a winner of Gen 7. And accepting the Influential Mobile Game Award, we have Armored Mewtwo. Oh, this time for sure. God dang it! Number 7. The aesthetics of the Alola region. So if you saw the top 10 losers of Gen 7 awards, you might recall a segment where I talked about one of the biggest detractors of Gen 7 was the fact that despite how beautiful the region was, it was unfortunately on rails. Well, here's the thing. While it did put the region on rails, it was still quite a beautifully realized region. The Alola region, aesthetically speaking, is simply the most beautiful realized region we have ever had to date. It's a case of show don't tell. Back in Red and Blue, back in the days of Kanto, before Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, the brilliance of the Kanto region was something we had to be told because of the medium the games were developed on. The world still looked good for the Game Boy, but there was only so much they could really do, and to fill in the gaps, they had to tell us about the interesting elements of the world. And that in itself is fine, but the thing is, if you went digging around the Alola region, there was also info that told you about the lore, and just how fascinating it was. The stories about Solgaleo and Lunala are great stuff in this. The first time you explore Melemele Island, it's breathtaking, it's simply gorgeous. To have these fully realized sprites explore this world that is just there. Nothing is cheapified, nothing is scaled down. It all looks amazing, albeit on rails. You have this beautiful view from the observatory, and just all the little details that went into the houses of the individual towns. All of it is so rich with culture of the Alola region, which admittedly, if you want to detract it just a little bit, it is literally Hawaii. It is so blatantly Hawaii, it borderline lacks its own identity, but the fact that they fully realize this world in such meticulous detail is outstanding. And that's just the region itself. The Alola Dex has, in my personal opinion, some of the most well thought out Pokemon they've ever introduced. The lore behind Mimikyu alone is fantastic. Toxapex and Mareanie, who we already talked about in the nominee segments, they are so amazingly well thought out and just perfect for this region. All three of the starters, the Tapus, Wishiwashi, and one of my personal favorites, Galiciopod. And even the Alolan forms, which we'll talk about in more detail later on. Spoiler alert. All of these Pokemon come together and just bring home that very few Pokemon are truly just slapped together ideas with no forethought put into them. There is a reason and a logic to pretty much every Pokemon design you can think of. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Z-moves. Mega Evolution was a cool idea, an amazing idea. It inspired creativity and wishful thinking in every single one of us because we basically wanted every Pokemon to get a Mega. Or 2 Megas in some cases, because with Pokemon like Charizard and Mewtwo, we saw that that was an actual thing people can expect, assuming the Pokemon was popular enough. But Z-moves had the design philosophy to allow every Pokemon to have a chance to look cool, while still giving some of them signature ones, which kind of defeats the purpose of that, sort of. But regardless of that nitpick, while Mega Evolutions were undoubtedly a very cool idea, they weren't sewn into the culture of the Kalos region the same way Z-moves were. Z-moves, as clever and fun as they are a gimmick that is so strictly tied to the Alola region that it would be a major stretch to justify how they would exist anywhere else in the world. Z-moves, Z-crystals, Z-rings are all tied strictly and almost entirely to the Tapus themselves. It's both a good thing and a bad thing, because on one hand, it's a really well thought out idea that ties into the themes of Pokemon Sun and Moon and the region itself. On the other hand, it pretty much guarantees that it's a gimmick that is only going to be in these games and is never going to show up in anywhere else ever again, unless we adopt my absolute favorite storytelling convention, ye old alternate universes, where in this universe, Z-moves are just available everywhere, without any rhyme, reason, or effort to actually tie things in, or maybe the idea of, hey, Alolan culture spread elsewhere, and people who wanted to obtain this power had to go over to the Alola region, go through the trials, and walk away with the power of Z-moves, but also learned a bit about themselves. That's an idea they could do. Whether or not they'll do it, who knows, but at this rate, it seems more likely that Z-moves are just going to be this very nice, interesting idea that was introduced in Gen 7, and it's pretty much going to stay there. But if nothing else, it made sense for the world, and it all brought home that the aesthetics of the Alola region are some of the best we've ever seen in Pokemon core games to date, and for all of those reasons, the aesthetics of the Alola region are undoubtedly major winners of Gen 7. And accepting the award for outstanding world building and beautiful aesthetics when it comes to region, Pokemon design, and even generation specific gimmick, we have Mimikyu! Number 6. Detective Pikachu. No, not that one! That one was good for like 90% of the movie, and then in the last 10 minutes pretty much shot itself in the foot, fell off a bridge, rolled over a bunch of jagged rocks, and No. We're talking about this, the 3DS game, the little game that could. And similar to Pokemon Go, part of it did come out during Gen 6, but only in Japan, and it wasn't the finished game. Gen 7 saw the full international release of this game, and man, this is easily one of my favorite Pokemon games ever. I treasure this game. It is one of my personal favorite Let's Plays on the channel, and it's so charming. Now, it is worth noting that the gameplay of Detective Pikachu is pretty much baby's first detective game. It's a cakewalk. It's super easy. A replay of the game could be done in 2 hours. Well, maybe more because there's a lot of cutscenes. But if you're skipping the cutscenes, yeah, you can beat this game super quickly. But the thing is, the world of Rhyme City, the world of Pokemon that it depicts in this game, is near perfect. It shows a side of the Pokemon world we very rarely see, from the point of view of people who are not Pokemon trainers. We have police inspectors, cafe owners, secretaries, researchers, TV show hosts and producers. It shows us the more mundane side of the Pokemon world, and that's so interesting to me. But on top of all of that, every single character in this game is so charming, so nice, so cool, so interesting. The story itself is incredibly engaging, and kind of interesting and amusingly dark in some places. Especially when you realize that this is a Pokemon game that's essentially about a drug bust. You go to an offshore black market auction, you raid a drug headquarters, and essentially stop a terrorist bombing. Well, a terrorist bombing of a gas that makes Pokemon go berserk, but still. And the game handles nostalgia in a way that's actually nice and cute and charming, and not just pointless pandering. Detective Pikachu briefly has a conversation with another Pikachu that's basically Ash's Pikachu. It's a throwaway line, but it's just a small detail that's very nice. And another small detail I really love about this game is that it doesn't just give the spotlight to the fan favorites. A lot of obscure Pokemon actually get a chance to be in the spotlight in this game. And every time I saw this throughout the adventure, I was always mesmerized by the fact that they would actually take the time to spotlight this Pokemon as opposed to anything else that was more popular. It brings home the fact that every Pokemon matters. That even if they're not popular, if it works within the story, well, why not use it? So much of this game was an absolute delight, and I treasure it to this day. I may not like it as much as Platinum, but Platinum is a really hard game to topple. This game is great, and I am oh so happy that it's getting a proper sequel on the Switch. Whether or not this game will also get ported to the Switch is yet to be seen, and I can kind of see it happening if only because, well, with the next game poised to be a proper follow-up to the original Detective Pikachu game, I could see them including or at least porting over the original game, if only so people won't be completely confused when they jump into this game, and it feels like a ton of plot is missing. So I'm looking forward to the sequel, not so much a sequel of the live-action movie, because where can they really go from there? I mean, seriously, if you know the ending, then you know exactly what I mean. But hey, for what it's worth, the live-action movie did a really good job at realizing a real-life Pokemon world. It had a lot of interesting imagery, a lot of cool ideas. It just had one of the worst endings ever, and a big reminder why I'm not a huge fan of modern-day comic book movies. But all of that aside, it overall did a good job. It was still a fun time at the movies, so you know what? While this award is strictly for the video game, the live action movie, you get a bit of acknowledgement too. You two did a fantastic job at proving that Pokemon could be plenty of things. It could be the exciting adventures of a trainer, but it could also be the adventure of just a kid trying to find out what happened to his father, and even if it's baby's first detective game, it's still a stepping stone into that genre, and it also proves that Pokemon can pull that genre off while showcasing some fascinating and incredibly charming world building at the same time. So Detective Pikachu, both the video game and the movie, you two did an excellent job. Though most of that credit goes to the video game. Again, no hard feelings live action, but those last 10 minutes. And accepting the Golden Coffee Cup Award for the best spin-off of Gen 7, we have Detective Pikachu. Number 5. Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. No, really, you're not seeing things. These pair of games are among the top 5 winners of Gen 7, at least in my opinion. That warning at the start of the video? Yeah, that's in full effect here. Because much like with Pokemon Go, I can understand why people wouldn't agree with just even acknowledging this game in the first place. But the thing is, for me personally, I honestly really needed this experience. For myself and many others, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon really did sour the Gen 7 experience. It was a fine game, an overall improvement, but it was also one of the most cynical cash-ins they have ever released as far as core Pokemon games. It felt lazy, it felt compromised, and it only came out just barely a year after Sun and Moon. So that was a long stretch of time of us dealing with this game that just was not a fun experience. It created a lot of cynicism, a lot of negativity, and it was so much negativity that it was affecting my own ability to enjoy Pokemon games. And then we saw Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and it was not what people wanted. It was yet another remake of Gen 1, it was using Go mechanics, it was a top-down perspective. Basically, it wasn't Pokemon meets Breath of the Wild. People were slamming it, there was an anti-hype train going that was at full force, and even going into the Let's Play, I had a neutral to not very enthusiastic attitude towards it. But then when I finally started playing the game, I was simply delighted. Here's the thing about Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Yes, this is the epitome of Gen 1 pandering, but it's not thoughtless pandering. There is a lot of effort being put into these games. The extra detail with all the cutscenes, the fact that the Go mechanics being incorporated into these games aren't shoehorned in. The games are very cleverly designed around the changes they had in mind, and as a result I'd actually consider these some of the more challenging games in the franchise. Because some of the trainers that you can encounter out there actually have well thought out teams designed within the sandbox that they had to work from. There is a legitimate challenge in this game, and that shocks me given that everything we had to go off of going in made it seem like this would be baby's first Pokemon game. And the catching mechanic is fairly enjoyable. Playing with the Pokeball accessory was a breeze. I'll fully admit that playing with the Joy-Con wasn't the best experience, it was a little janky, but I don't think that was a cynical attempt to sell the Pokeball Plus. I think that's just the nature of throwing motions with a rectangular object as opposed to a sphere. But issues with motion controls aside, it doesn't take away from the fact that I just had a lot of fun playing this game. Yeah, its online component is absolutely garbage! By far the worst online setup we have ever had for a Pokemon game, but while I don't defend it, I understand where it's coming from because it makes it painfully clear this was not designed around multiplayer. It was designed to be just a standalone Pokemon experience. A simple and fun JRPG. That's what it was meant to be. The meta within the game is kind of wonky and a little stupid at points. Stealth rocks and no rapid spin. But ignoring some glaring omissions, the game feels like it's cleverly designed around the fact that there's no Z moves, there's still Mega Evolutions, but the lack of abilities and the lack of certain moves really does change the approach you will have with certain Pokemon. In a way, it was kind of a warm-up for Pokemon Sword and Shield, which is a whole other thing that we can get into, but not in this video. But regardless, it showed their ability and willingness to tinker and experiment with the idea of a meta designed within a smaller sandbox. Of having a preset number of Pokemon, designing these Pokemon based on their moves and various attributes, and making its own self-contained meta within that box. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee at the end of the day was fun. I had fun. And that really is why it's here on the list. For all the flaws it has, it was the first time in a long while that playing a core Pokemon game didn't feel like work. It was a legitimate joy. It reignited that spark to just enjoy a Pokemon game. The amount of effort was shining in this experience, and it's one that I can't ignore. Whether or not you like the catching mechanics, Whether or not you're absolutely sick of the genuine pandering, it was hard to deny that this was a fun experience. Not everyone's going to agree with this, but for me personally, it was an experience I needed, and well, it deserves acknowledgement, if only for that. And accepting the award for Stellar Remix that defy all expectations, we have Blue from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Not the friendly rival, he's a different character entirely. Thank Arceus for that. Number 4. Guzma and Lusamine. I seriously cannot pick who's the better villain between these two. Pokemon Sun and Moon, and by extension Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, are games that, if it hasn't already been made clear in this video and in the top 10 losers video, they're games that face a recurrent trend of dealing with compromise. Because while we got a beautiful region, we also got one that was on rails. Both as far as places to explore, but also the narrative itself was on rails. And it was barely our story to begin with, it was basically Lily's. But the trade-off in this, and not necessarily the fairest compromise, was that the story, in my personal opinion, was amazing. I absolutely love the themes and the storytelling of Pokemon Sun and Moon. And I can see what they were going for with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, despite the fact that it really doesn't work. But in Sun and Moon, it was fantastic. Lusamine is easily one of my favorite villains in Pokemon ever, because she's not just evil for the sake of evil. Lusamine's intentions started out good. She simply wanted to save her husband, who was taken away by the Ultra Beasts. Or at least as far as she knew, they were taken away by the Ultra Beasts. And in this pursuit of finding the Ultra Beasts, she ended up losing sight of her goal. It got so bad that she would stop seeing her own children as her children and just saw them as possessions, objects in her collection. With this notion represented best by the Pokemon she basically has petrified and on display in the room where she reveals just how twisted she really is at this point. Lusamine as a villain is just chilling because there's a layer of realism to this kind of character. It's very easy to imagine someone going off the deep end like this. And that's what makes her so intimidating, so scary. And that's also what makes things all the sweeter when Lily doesn't completely turn on her, when Lily tries to save her. And then to have Lusamine finally acknowledge her. Stuff like this is why I love the storytelling in Sun and Moon. It's just amazing, and I treasure it so much. Guzma, on the other hand, in the games tells a very interesting story of a loser who's basically taken advantage of. He wants to do better, he wants to break away from the rigid traditions of the Alola region. And yet his rival, Kukui, also wants to do the same thing, but his approach is different, and his approach has proven to be successful. Throughout the games, Guzma is defeated and is constantly beating himself up. And in the post-game, we do manage to get some details about Guzma's history. And while some of it is left up to personal speculation, what we do get right in front of us is proof of a person who's routinely had to deal with suffering defeats. Someone who's strived for victory time and time again, but has had to settle for second place. And there's just something fascinating about seeing what this does to Guzma as a character. And in-game with Lusamine, he unfortunately became another pawn. And Guzma as a character only gets better in the anime, where frankly, he is responsible for one of my favorite episodes in the anime ever. Guzma's depiction in the anime is nigh perfect. I love how they reinterpreted one of his famous lines, and I just love the story they told between him and Kukui. It's so well done, it's so amazing! And while Lusamine's depiction in the anime isn't nearly as interesting as it is in the games, mostly because the game's fully committed to her being really twisted, and in the anime she does get a redemption arc and she basically becomes a good guy a little too quickly, I would say. But regardless of that, these two are a fascinating pair of villains. They complement each other great, they have amazing themes, they have their own individual stories that do loosely connect within the games. It's not a direct connection, but their paths and personal goals intersect in a way that tells a really cool story. Was it worth the lack of exploration in the games? Was it worth the story not being our own? Ultimately no, but again, compromises. If we weren't going to have our own story, at least we had this really interesting one. And again, not everyone's going to agree with that, but hey, that's what I think. One of the shining highlights of Pokemon Sun and Moon for me was the villains. It was the writing, so for those reasons, I can't pick between these two, and thus in my eyes, they're both winners of Gen 7. So Lusamine, you're probably used to getting all sorts of awards, but Guzma, well, it may not be first place, but hey, you're still walking away with gold tonight. And accepting the awards for outstanding antagonists in a Pokemon game, we have Guzma and Lusamine!
Yo!
Number 3. regional variants. The moment they debuted, I love this concept. It's a brilliant idea, it makes total sense within the universe. Everything about this was a total win. Just like with Mega Evolutions, it got people thinking, speculating, making their own designs, and having wishful thinking for what Pokemon would receive Alolan forms. And it was only Kanto Pokemon. Did Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon introduce any new ones? No. But that aside, it was still an amazing idea. An amazing concept that immediately for 3 years, we were just praying that this would not be a Gen 7 Oni idea. And thankfully, it turns out it wasn't. And that's actually a reason why this is so high up on the list. Because it's an idea so good, so logical, that they didn't abandon it. Alolan forms gave us a new way to interpret and look at certain Pokemon. Some of them wouldn't change too much, but others would completely shift in playstyle. They would have completely new typings, and in many cases would see way more viability than their previous forms. Some Alolan forms not so much, some were a cute novelty, but then you have Pokemon like Alolan Muk, Alolan Ninetales, Alolan Marowak, who would just breathe so much new life to the names of these Pokemon. Sure, nothing was really done to make their previous forms any more playable, but at least their namesake and their legacy would continue with these new interpretations of them. And as we talked about previously, a lot of these Alolan forms actually added a lot to the world building of the Alola region. Say what you will about Muk, the fact that it obtained this form basically by helping clean the Alola region is really neat. Or Marowak's design fully embracing the Hawaiian culture with fire dancing. And then there's Exeggutor, who retroactively are supposed to look like this because they were imported from the Alola region, but due to the different environment, got a lot shorter, and even lost their dragon typing as they adapted to the Kanto climate. Alolan forms do things I love with Pokemon, adding to the world building, giving us new options for gameplay, giving us more options in general, and just allowing us as a fan base to have our imaginations go wild. And thanks to Sword and Shield, we know we can actually continue to dream about this concept. Who knows what other regional variants will have? The fact that I get to call it regional variants and not just Alolan forms is telling of the fact that this idea didn't get shafted. And that's a rare instance that can't be ignored. We grew so used to the idea of just assuming they would abandon a concept when it was introduced in a given generation, but here, not the case. The only detriment Alolan forms really suffer from is the fact that their stats aren't boosted, they're just rearranged. Which is fair, but it does mean some lesser Pokemon like Raticate unfortunately suffered because, well, they were just an early game encounter in Gen 1, and Gen 1 was developed with a more traditional JRPG mindset. Doesn't mean their stats can't be boosted in later games, but it's still a minor issue that is worth noting, and again, it's something that can be changed with future installments. No one will know for sure, but hey, at least now I can continue to hope for a regional variant of Miltank. Please. Please give me that. Please? Please? And accepting the award for inspiring new concept introduced in a generation that was not abandoned in the very next one, we have Alolan Ninetales! Number 2. The Pokemon Sun and Moon anime. To be completely honest and fully transparent for a moment, if it were up to me, and technically it is, this right here would be my absolute number 1 pick for the biggest winner of Gen 7. And the main reason why it's not was because I wanted my number 1 pick to be a battle between 4 Pokemon who affected the Gen 7 meta. But also because I thought it would be a lot more interesting that way, and frankly because I know picking this as number 1 would be a tad controversial, and I thought it would be a lot more fun to have people voting between the Pokemon as opposed to 3 Pokemon and the anime. Because on top of that, my perspective of the Pokemon anime is skewed because I am exclusively watching the sub and not the dub. Because I personally can't stand a dub, and it pains me that they changed the music, and frankly that a lot of the voice casting just never sounds quite right to me. But all of that aside, the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime is by far my favorite aspect of this generation. The anime, to me, is frankly borderline perfect as far as a Pokemon anime experience. It's a series that's clearly learned from the mistakes of both Best Wishes and X and Y. Both those series had their own pros as well, and they're pros that we also see in Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon feels like an anime that didn't give up. It was bold, it was willing to take risks. Its biggest risk was its incredibly controversial shift in animation style. And it's a style that, yes, at first did seem pretty rough, but as episodes went on, they began to get a feel for how to make it work. And as we entered the Alola League, you see the style shifting, and as often the case, it ends up proving to be a foreshadow for what the upcoming anime will look like. And that seems to be what we got here. But besides that, the animation style led to some incredibly fluid moments. The show for most part was gorgeously animated, and that's the key word, animated. Animation was lovely in this series. Yes, Ash vs. Shuta was amazingly well animated too, but that was only for those moments. It wasn't a style of animation that was sustainable on a weekly basis. And it wasn't just the animation. The music, which is also subjective but in my personal opinion was some of the best we ever had here, was just amazing. So emotional when it needed to be. And speaking of emotional, this was the series that actually had canonical proper death in it. We had no less than 3 episodes that dealt directly with death. 2 involving Pokemon and 1 involving an actual human character. Sure, Mallow's mom had already passed away, but it had Mallow dealing with the death of her mother, with Mallow apologizing to her mother and just being thankful for being born. Oh my goodness, this series is just amazing. I'll be the first to admit that personally speaking, I was initially frustrated when the Sun and Moon anime wasn't just straight up adapting the game plots. Because when they were building up the Lusamine arc, I was looking forward to basically what we had in the games, but in the anime. And we didn't quite get that. But it was the earliest foretelling of the fact that the Pokemon anime was going to do something different. An alternate retelling, so to speak. Except unlike Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, in the cases here between all the major arcs, the changes more or less worked. I will admit, the Necrozma storyline could have been better, but frankly, was it any worse than how it was handled in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon? It's subjective. But how they handled Guzma? Mwah! Chef's kiss, it's amazing. I could go on for so long about how perfect, absolutely perfect Guzma was as a character in the Sun and Moon anime. His story is just nigh flawless, and honestly, it is legitimately one of my favorite episodes in the Pokemon anime ever, if not my absolute favorite ever. It recontextualized Guzma's character, and even managed to tell a lesson that we would learn through Ash with each generation when he would eventually lose the league, about the importance of not giving up, about how when you've lost, it's okay to lose, and the important thing is to learn and take that next big step forward. They told that lesson through Guzma, and it was amazing. And on top of that, this is the anime where Ash finally won a Pokemon League. And the thing is, he had a reason to win it. It was earned. There was a story reason for him to win this time, unlike every other instance where he lost a Pokemon League. Stuff like this I can make full videos out of, and I fully intend to. But all I can say is the slice of life nature of the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime was a match made in heaven. It again compromises with the fact that the Alola region is naturally smaller than a full region that is basically a glorified country, or, you know, however regions are depicted in the Pokemon world. But it also made every character matter. There was barely any characters of the week because a lot of these characters would end up showing up again later on down the road, and they would get development as a result. This series allowed the writers to find a perfect groove, a great way to update the storytelling of the Pokemon anime and elevate it into something that is legitimately good entertainment for children. But on top of that, it was just comfort entertainment for me. It was always nice to know that the Pokemon anime would always be there, and there was barely any bad episodes in my personal opinion. Yeah, there were kind of meh episodes or slow episodes or episodes that don't really do much, but actual bad episodes? In my personal opinion, there wasn't really all that many. The Pokemon Sun and Moon anime is a treasure. And in an era when my love for Pokemon was challenged by a lot of people really making me just feel down and sad and frustrated, both at myself but at others, and just struggling to find joy in things that I'm supposed to love, the Pokemon anime was always there. I give full credit to all the subbers out there who are responsible for getting the Pokemon anime out there in its Japanese format, because it's an absolute shame that we can't legally enjoy the Japanese version of the anime. I've grown to appreciate the nuances of the voice acting, the music especially, and this is the series where we had to say goodbye to the original voice of Professor Oak, as he passed away about 2/3 of the way through the series. It was a major shame, and I'm still barely used to the new Professor Oak and Samson voice. But regardless of that, a lot of people's legacies are concluding with this anime, whether because they're stepping down or because they've unfortunately passed away. This series is a treasure. The enthusiasm and energy that was poured into this series radiates so brightly. And for that reason, in my personal opinion, this is the #1 winner of Gen 7, But again, to be completely transparent, I knew it wouldn't be fair to have a vote and then just pick this because, well, it's my own personal favorite, and opinions of the Pokemon anime, but especially this one in particular, are incredibly divisive. So I figured, let's make this the last proper normal award, so to speak, before we move on to the big finale award, which will still, for the record, be the #1 winner of Gen 7, but I want all of you to know that the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime is the #1 winner in my heart. Even if I gotta give it runner-up, unlike Ash, who did walk away with the big trophy. Huh. There's a lot of irony in that, isn't there? Yep, there is. And accepting the award for being the ironic saving grace of the Gen 7 anime, we have Ash Ketchum from Sun and Moon, who will be walking away with the second place trophy. Sort of like how he did in X and Y. Well everyone, we're finally here at the big award of the night, the Golden Cosmome Award. An illustrious award only given out to the #1 responsible for proving that Generation 7 did have a lot of positive qualities to it. And just like with the Silver League's top 10 losers of Gen 7 awards, we made a video spotlighting each of the 4 nominees who were in the running for the big award tonight. But we also let you, the audience at home, have a chance to cast your vote for who you think should walk away with the Viewer's Choice Award for the #1 winner of Gen 7. So with all of that said and all the votes tallied, let's find out who's going to be walking away with the Golden Cosmome Award tonight. And the nominees are Toxapex, Pelipper, Hawlucha, and Ash Greninja. And the fan voted #1 winner of Gen 7 is Pelipper. Congratulations, Pelipper! For generations you got by with just being fine, but you proved that with a little effort, any Pokemon can become top tier, and the fans recognized you for that. But now it's time to reveal the Silver League's own pick for the #1 winner of Gen 7. And the Golden Cosmome Award goes to Pelipper! What can be said about Pelipper that wasn't said already? Well, in truth, actually, this wasn't an easy decision to make. For the longest time, Hawlucha was going to be my pick for the #1 winner of Gen 7. But then as I was putting this video together, I got thinking. Pelipper's been around since Gen 3. He was fine, never terrible, but never saw any play. And then out of nowhere, he swooped in and dominated. He became top tier, he became beloved, he became plenty of people's favorites. But similar praises can be said about all the nominees, so what makes Pelipper any different? Well, for me personally, it's the fact that he doesn't rely on a gimmick. All he got was a stat buff and a new ability, not even a hidden ability. The things that make Pelipper awesome don't involve a Mega Evolution, a Z move, or even a hidden ability. If nothing else, it highlights the potential that every single Pokemon in this game has if they're granted new tools that help elevate them. And they don't even have to be new tools, just things that are new to them specifically. Drizzle's not anything new, it's something we've been dealing with coincidentally since Gen 3. That grew into major and frustrating prominence in Gen 5, and here, all these years later, we see it in Pelipper, and it's a perfect match made in heaven. It shows that a Pokemon doesn't need a Mega Evolution to be good. It doesn't need a Z move to be good. It shows the potential of every single Pokemon. And in a way, as we step into Gen 8, where a lot of Pokemon are going to be losing their Megas, and everyone's going to be losing access to Z moves, I feel like Pelipper best represents what we should hope for moving forward when it comes to good Pokemon design. Pokemon whose qualities stand on their own and aren't reliant on a gimmick that may not survive to see the next generation, and yet can both simultaneously benefit from those gimmicks, but also survive in a meta built around them. I feel like for that reason alone, if nothing else, Pelipper is without a doubt the single biggest winner of Gen 7, because he was a Pokemon who made a big impact, made a big difference, and showed that any Pokemon can be good if the right conditions are met. So Pelipper, with the extreme irony that I'm praising a Pokemon whose ability is to summon the rain by just existing, you, my toilet bird friend, are without a doubt the biggest winner of Gen 7. And accepting the Golden Cosmome Award, we have my own personal Pelipper, Portable Joe! Politoed. Chikorita Neko. Can't be.
A brand new world is calling, Silver, and it's got mine and Politoad's name on it.
There's something only I can do. No. Something only we can do. You ready, Miltank?
Me?